more mana. I'm ready, and not before. Don't let him make a mess! Mana.
The void protects its children.
When I'm ready, and not before.
Hello, and welcome to my first ever PoE build guide. This is going to be a bit of a rough guide as it is my first, so bear with me. But this is a guide for Fireball Elementalist in PoE Crucible 3.21 League. So I've reached the level 100 this league, got the last few levels via posting services for a few divines here and there, And in this guide, I will spread out into 5 parts, maybe 6. I will post timestamps on your screen right now and in the description, of course, for the breakdown. So the build is this video is going to have 5 parts. Number 1, how it works. 2, explaining of mapping, what it can, what it cannot do, and bosses as well. Leveling breakdown, gem breakdown, and final gear breakdown, where I'll explain all the gear and thought process behind it. So to start with, how does the build work? Because we're playing an Elementalist and Fire Elementalist, we're going for Shaper Flames. All of damage can ignite, and we have more damage with ignites. We have Mastermind of Discord, which gives us extra exposure whenever we inflict exposure, which we will be inflicting a lot. Then we have Heart of Destruction, which gives us more elemental damage when we hit a unique enemy, and when we haven't hit a unique enemy or its cycles, we get more AoE. And of course, the last Bastion of Elements, we get a shield per allocated notable, that's 75 per, and we cannot take reflected damage. Keep in mind that shield is only for elemental damage. So it says here, elemental damage from hits is taken from this Aegis before your life or energy shield. The Aegis will be restored to full value if you take no elemental damage from hits for a while. So there's that. I think it refreshes every 4 seconds. So in retrospect, in short, we want to shred our enemy's resistance so we can deal more damage. That's how build works, whether we do it by on-hit curses or AoE curses around us, or exposure around us, fire exposure around us, it doesn't matter. We just want to shred their resistances as much into negative as possible. Now, to explain the mapping goes very smooth. There are a few mods that are very annoying to deal with, but overall, mapping and bossing is very smooth, and the build cannot do uber bosses. I've tried doing uber Cirrus for multiple times and failed every time in the last phase, especially because you need to cast, he moves a lot, there's Legion on the ground, you cannot cover it all, and you will just eventually die with this build. It's probably a skill issue, as one of my viewers would say, but unfortunately I cannot do it. I also tried Uber Shaper, and I encountered the issue where there's just too much going on the screen. I wanted to cast, I had nowhere to move, he Shaper slammed me multiple times, and that was just it. I just gave up and said, it's not doable for me at this time and stage that I'm currently at. So skill issue. For maps, the mods that you would want to avoid just to make things easier are cannot inflict exposure. That's a very, very bad one for us. That hurts us, but the maps are still doable. It's just they're very annoying. Monsters are hexproof is the one as well, the same as exposure. You can inflict exposure, but you cannot inflict curses, which is flammability. That's the most important one to us, and an elemental weakness. So you would have to juggle around. There's the one that we cannot block. We have 30% block from our staff and passives, which I'll explain later. And if we have 0, that's going to interrupt our spellcasts a lot more. That's bad as well. Avoid if possible. If not, it's doable, but you have 6 portals for your maps for a reason. Then there's cannot regen. That one is just so-so, depending on whether you like to do things the regen way or not. You would have to rely on your enduring flask a lot more, and your life flask needs to have more flat out regen, less half regen, or less half instant, half regen. So there's that. That's just an annoying mod. But the mod that is the worst of all is monsters have chance to avoid elemental ailments. That one can straight up poof delete our build. The reason why is we are an ignite build, and if monsters have 75, 85, 95% chance to avoid elemental ailments, that's basically only a 5% chance for us to deal damage. When we deal damage, there's a lot of damage, but you get the point. We are unable to do it 95% of the time. That one I would avoid at all cost. Everything else is basically your personal preference. No problem with any of the mods, besides maybe monsters have extra crit and crit multi, but if they reach you, that's basically it. Okay, so for leveling breakdown. For leveling, what you would like to do, or what I would like to do, is I like to take the gems that I will use later down the line that I would like to, or I actually like to use them from the beginning. So for AoE, I would level a ranger. I would level a ranger to get volley, the one that gives you 2 extra projectiles on the side of your main projectile, and then switch to the wizard, the witch, and then go with Fireball Volley as the beginning, and then Arcane Surge, or just you flat out start adding damage. So for AoE setup, I would use LMP, GMP, or Volley, LMP, GMP. Each one of these, the higher level you are. I would use Burning Damage, Ignite Proliferation, and Fireball. So that's 4 link. For a single target, I would use Burning Damage, the Fireball, the Swift Affliction, and you can do either Ignite Proliferation or Swift and Deadly Ailments. Deadly Ailments. So there's that. That's for your single target setup. For the beginning setup, for the Flammability Curse Affliction, it would be Wave of Conviction, Combustion, Hex Touch, Flammability. That's the 4. So every time you hex, you do Wave of Conviction, you will hex touch the Flammability Curse as well. Less effect, but you can inflict it. And for your setup that gives you Arcane Surge and movement and extra damage with your fireballs, it's Flame Wall, faster casting, Arcane Surge level 1, and Flame Dash. So those are the regular ones. For your auras, Determination, Defiance Banner, Arctic Armor. Those 3 would be okay, and Skitterbots. So I would personally go Skitterbots first, Determination second, and when you have more mana to fit in, you can fit in the rest. Now, when we go through gem breakdown, this is going to be the breakdown of gems at the stage I'm currently at. You can work towards it. You can look at my previous build diaries. I will link them all down in the description below. Of course, they all have POBs at that specific time, but this one is going to focus on the end game and what I did for the exact end game. So for AoE setup, we have Phantasmal Fireball. The reason I went with Phantasmal is because Debilitate. The enemies that are debilitated have 20% less movement speed and deal 10% less damage. That just makes survivability a little bit easier. Plus, when we do it on an AoE, most of the time enemies will be debilitated anyways, or dead. You choose. Next one is GMP, Greater Multiple Projectiles. You don't need Awaken GMP. That's fine. You can still have 5 projectiles. That's great. You can also do LMP and whatnot, or you can even use Dying Sun. And then instead of GMP, I would just get an Empower or something else to add extra damage for an AoE setup. Keep in mind, with Dying Sun, we only have 3 projectiles. This way we have 5. 5 is great for coverage. The more you mouse over your own character, the more spread it gets. The farther you go, the less spread it has. That's how it works. Awaken Deadly Ailments. We want to deal more damage with ailments quicker, basically. So this one is more damage with ailments, but we get reduced damage from hits. We don't care about hits. We just want our hits to apply all the ignites that we possibly can. And because all of our damage can ignite, we always apply ignite anyways. Ignite Proliferation is to spread ignites and deal more damage with ignite. Swift Affliction. Igniting enemies works in a different way than some of maybe other ailments. It is, you want to deal as much damage in as short duration possible. If you go Unbound Ailments, like I did in my previous build diaries, you will see that you deal more damage, but over the longer period of time. You want to deal as much damage in a shorter period of time, and that's why it's Swift Affliction, because you deal more damage over time and less duration of supported skills and damaging ailments they inflict. So you want to reduce that as much as possible. With this build, I think it's roughly, with convergence, it's around 7 million every 3 seconds or so. So that's roughly 1.8, 1.7 million a second. And the last is Awakened Burning Damage Support. Well, Burning Damage Support into an Awakened because it gives +1 to level. For main socket, for main single target skill, we of course go Phantasmal Fireball yet again. Because even in bossing situations, if Debilitate procs, Debilitate is a very good defensive tool and it makes enemies attack less. If they have less chance to attack, we have better survivability chances. You of course want to max out the level as possible, so you would use an Empower. Awaken Empower is not needed to get like level 5 Empower, so that's Awakened Empower, so we can get one more level. That's for absolute endgame min-maxing. There's no need to even Empower level 4 is a bit overkill, but I had extra currency, so I gave it a test. Between level 35 and 36, there's less of a jump than between 34 and 35, 33, 34, and so on and so on. So from 21 to 30, there's the biggest jump. From 30 to 35, there's a bit smaller jump, and from 36 above, there's even smaller jump of damage per level of Fireball. Now, of course, we have Awakened Burning Damage Support that gives us extra level, Awakened Deadly Ailments, Awakened Swift Affliction, we want to deal as much as quickly, and the last one that I found is the best is Ignite Proliferation Support. The reason for it is it deals more damage with Ignite. Yes, it does spread, but the only other option was Unbound Ailments. I didn't want to do more damage for longer, I wanted to do more damage shorter. There's a % or 2 difference between Awakened Unbound Ailments versus Ignite Proliferation, so I chose to go with Ignite Proliferation. That just means you have to reapply your fire damage quicker. And if you can stay close to the boss, that's an easy job. If you cannot, well, that can be a problem. That's why this build also cannot do Uber bosses, as you cannot apply your damage for a long time, as you have to dodge all things around. Now, for my head setup in Eye of Malice, I have Flame Dash, Arcane Surge, Faster Casting, and Flame Wall. As I said before, each one of these applications gives you Arcane Surge, but you want to shoot your fireballs through the Flame Wall so they get added damage. So I will show you one little thing here, because everything is blue now. So now when it's red, you can see the fireball getting a bit of red over it, which means it passed through the wall, and you can hear distinct that sound that the projectile went through the wall and it gained extra damage. Arcane Surge level 1, you don't want it higher because you want it to proc on everything. You can go higher depending on your cost, so mine's 33 mana cost here and this one is 23, so I can level it like 2-3 levels. It doesn't matter, keep it 120 quality, all good. For your ring, which is Profane Proxy, you want Anomalous Flammability. That will remove the chill from skitterbots if it's in the left left ring slot, pardon, and it will apply flammability. So we use this one instead of Hex Touch. For your Hands of the High Templar, there's a simple setup, which is Defiance Banner, Wave of Conviction, Combustion, and Molten Shell. Wave of Conviction and Combustion need to be linked, everything else does not need to be linked, which is fine. I've explained these. Molten Shell, of course, for added armor. It benefits from levels of gems. Now, for Wave of Conviction, the reason why we go Combustion, that's for extra 10% fire resistance shred. The other ring is Malakai's Artifice with Stormbrand, which applies Elemental Equilibrium. More on that in a second after gems. And we have Enlighten with Skitterbots, Arctic Armor, and Determination. Those are the three that use the most mana, and that's why I have connected them with Enlighten. And now for the final gear breakdown, this is going to be long. I will start with passives. So I will start with passives, and here we have, of course, Careful Planning Jewel, which gives us Dexterity instead of Intelligence. So Intelligence from passives in Radius is transformed to Dexterity. If we don't use it, we need 88 more Dexterity. Basically, build doesn't work. Then we have, for our cluster jewels, we have a big cluster jewel, large, which has Burning Bright, Doriani, Sadist. So Burning Bright gives us burning damage, area of effect. Sadist gives us elemental damage if we've chilled, ignite, and shocked an enemy recently. More on that with Arctic Armor. Doriani gives us elemental damage leached as life. The second large cluster is Doriani, Prismatic Heart, and Smoking Remains. So Prismatic Heart gives us elemental damage and 10 to all elemental resistances. Smoking Remains gives us the most fire damage of any notable in Fire Cluster Jewel tree, and it gives us 10% chance to create a smoke cloud. That's just some evasion, doesn't really matter. The reason why you take 2 Dorianis is because it really helps. The regen that you get from elemental damage that you deal is massive. Now, it's nerfed from before. It was 0.4 before, if I'm not mistaken, but it's still very good. Now, on medium cluster jewels, there are 3 of them, not 4. 3 of them. I sacrificed 4th for the mana reservation, but for 3 that we have, they're all the same. They're Burning Bright and Cooked Alive on burning damage. What they do is Burning Bright, burning damage, area of effect, and chance to ignite, which is useless for us, but enemies ignited by you have -5 to fire resistance. Triple those, that's -15, which is very, very good. Now, for jewels, I'll end with the Watcher's Eye. Let's start with, so we did the Careful Planning. Now, there's this one, Crimson Jewel, which is fire damage over time multi, max life, reduced ignite duration. We want to have 100, 102, whatever percent reduced ignite duration, so ignites that are shorter than 0.3 seconds get nullified immediately. The second one is you cannot be hindered, max life, and reduced ignite duration on you. The strength and int and increased mana regen rate are just a bonus, but I wanted this because you cannot be hindered. In general, you would like them to have life, fire damage over time multi, reduced ignite duration, and 1 extra mod, whichever one you want for the prefix. Here, this one has increased mana regen rate, which is completely fine. Now, for this one is max life, chaos resistance, and burning damage. This one you want, instead of burning damage, you want fire damage over time multi, but those were way too expensive at the time, so I settled with this one. You want to cap your chaos resistance, which is important. Now, on this one, it's Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted. There's spell damage while dual wielding, that's useless. Fire damage over time multi, fire damage, and dex and int. That's 3 useful modifiers plus Corrupted Blood, which is completely fine. And the last but not least from the rare ones, there's the Cobalt Jewel here, fire damage over time multi, life, reduced ignite duration, and the dead mod, increased damage with wands. So this makes us 100%, this makes us kind of immune to ignites, and we reduce the ignite duration by 100%. Any ignite that's longer than 0.3 seconds after the reduction gets applied. Any that isn't doesn't get applied. And the last but not least, Watcher's Eye with armor and unaffected by vulnerability. As I said before, we are getting decimated by physical damage. That's the only problem for the build. If it's elemental damage, it's survivable. If it's physical, it's very difficult. What we want with this one is we want to have more armor, so it's between 600 and 1000 armor, and we want to be unaffected by vulnerability. Vulnerability is the curse that reduces our armor and that makes us take more physical damage, and we can get bled easier, so enemies can apply bleeding a lot easier. Honorable mentions are Life Mastery, maximum life if there are no life modifiers on equipped body armor. Diala has no life. Auras from your skills have 10% increased effect on you, which basically means we get more armor, more defenses from our auras. And of course, increased mana reservation efficiency of skills, because we want to fit in that 5th aura to help us with the damage and damage reduction and whatnot. One more thing that could be added is fire exposure inflict applies an extra 5% to fire resistance. That's good, but I haven't tested. Everything else is like meh. Burning enemies you kill have chance to explode. It's 3% chance to explode. That's like, it's literally 0, because we are already dealing so much damage. They are dying almost instantly on highest tier content maps like 100% delirious and whatnot. So that's for the passive tree breakdown with the gear. Now for the gear itself. I will do the weapon last. First things first, we get boots. Boots have 1 high res, chaos res, life, aspect of the spider, and crafted mod to avoid being chilled. Very simple. We have ignites, you inflict deal damage faster. We want faster ignites, and 5% movement speed. These are the ones that you get with Searing Exarch and Ether of Worlds modifiers. You can go with even higher. There's no need to. That's fine. Increased attack and cast speed if you killed recently is just the one that I received in lab just while I helped a friend out. Now for the Stygian. Stygian has low life. It has percent life, but it has fire and chaos res high rolls and an open suffix, so we can fit in more chaos res as we need that chaos res to get capped. Upgrade would be get a higher tiered life, get something with armor instead of mana. That's basically it. The Searching Eye Jewel in it has life, mana, chaos resistance. That's it. Effective cold modifiers, or ailments, pardon. That's okay. For Hands of the High Templar, these you start out with basic ones, then you add Curse Elemental Weakness on hit, and then you add 2 to Socketed Duration and AoE. By chance, this one had attack and cast speed as well. Attack speed is just a bonus, which is useless. Cast speed is just a bonus, which is useful. These were 4 divines. That's fine. In these, we socket Defiance Banner, so we get +4 levels to that. Molten Shell +4. And we gain Way of Conviction +4 because they are Socketed Duration and AoE. If you find Socketed AoE and Socketed Curse or something else of that kind, you would just move the Enlightened setup there and move these here, and that's it. Now, for the headpiece, I said the thing. For this one, I did this one. Now, Malakai's Artifice with Stormbrand. It has Socketed Gems have Elemental Equilibrium. So hits that deal elemental damage, remove exposure to those elements and inflict exposure to other elements, applying -25% to resistances. Exposure always overrides to the stronger one. The reason we have Stormbrand in is twofold. Number one, we gain lightning resistance with Socketed with a blue gem. That's number one. Number two, it deals flat lightning damage, which means it takes away lightning exposure, remove exposure to those elements. It takes away lightning exposure, but gives other two. It gives cold and fire exposure. Cold exposure, we don't care about. Fire exposure is what we do, so it gives us 25%. But wait, why doesn't Wave of Conviction work? It does, but Wave of Conviction does 15% plus 10% of combustion. That's 15 exposure and 10 regular shred, while this one gives 25. On single target, you want to use Stormbrand into Wave of Conviction because you're going to get 25 from LA Equilibrium, because Stormbrand takes a bit. This is how it looks. It just takes a bit. You can apply up to 3. And then you apply Wave of Conviction, so you get combustion. It won't override the exposure because it always applies the highest exposure. And that's what shreds those resistances. Now for the Profane Proxy, we want it in left slot, so we cannot apply chilling AoE effect. That's where the spider comes in, but we can apply flammability. The reason why it's not in Hex Touch is because Hex Touch reduces the effect of curse by 35%, while this one keeps it up fully. So instead of having 25 to 30% fire resistance shred, we have full 46%. Now for the necklace, necklace comes in 3 levels. When you start the game, when you get to maps, you want to buy +1 to level of all fire skill gems, that's roughly 10 chaos. When you have currency, you want to get to all fire and to all skill gems, that's roughly 5 divines. Then you allocate Whispers of Doom. And the third one that I have is 1 to all skill, 1 to all fire, and determination has increased mana reservation efficiency. We want to knock down the mana reservation efficiency as much as possible so that we can fit in the 5th aura. That's why we also have quality with life and mana modifiers, which increases our determination mana reservation efficiency. You can divine this to get it to 50, so it is going to be 60 at the end. But you don't need to, you don't have to, everything works fine. For the chest, the Allah's Malefaction, red sockets give you +2 to level, green sockets give you +30 to quality, blue sockets you want to avoid. White sockets, don't have them, because white sockets do nothing. Now, for these, you want to have 2 reds, 4 greens. The reason for it is those 2 reds are going to give you +2 to level, which is you want to level on your fireball and you want to level to your empower. Empower with level gives your socketed support skill gems extra level. So empower 4 gives you 3 levels, but empower 6 gives you 5. That's why you want 2 red and 4 green, because the quality on these give more damage than actual raising of the level. You can check that also in the POB that I will be posting, of course, in the Alas here. So if we post all red sockets, you can see that we are actually losing damage than the ones that we are not currently. But if we post green every green, we also lose damage. We lose a lot of damage because our fireball is not as high level as it was. Now, for the most important part of the build, there's 2 weapons. 1, you start with Searing Touch Lathy as your main weapon. You can 6-link this one. You can buy it 6-linked, like 2 divines or something, which is perfectly fine. Coloring this one is going to take a bit because you put in your AoE spells in the AoE setup in the Lathy, which needs 3 green, and Lathy is strengthened. So good luck. It took me a good amount of colors to do so. And after Lathy, so if I compare these 2, this is the next staff that you want to get. So from +2 to level of all fire spell skill gems to +3 to all fire and +2 to all spell skill gems, plus extra cast speed, and of course 3 crafted modifiers: fire damage over time multi, fire damage, chance to ignite. You lose some fire damage over time multi. This one can roll 40 to 60, but on the crafted one you get 31 to 35. Yes, you do lose some, but you gain so much more gem level that you will never notice that you lost like fire damage over time multi, of course. Now, what Lathy does, or Imperial Staff, it gives you 18% chance to block attack damage while wielding a staff. And we have total of 30% because we also have this one, Whirling Barrier. Every time we block, well, 20% chance to gain a power charge when we block. And we have 30% chance to block attack damage, 12 for spell damage. Now, this weapon costs 18.5 divines to buy, to socket out, to color, to link, and I do not recommend this until very, very late in the game, and if you have a lot of currency to spare, or if you get lucky drops, if you're not Searing Exarch, if you're doing the Eater of Worlds modifiers, and then you get the lucky divine card, divine orb drop from mobs. So there's that. Overall, this build cost around 70 divines, 10 goes in Enlightened Support, 5 in Empower, 18.5 here, 4 here because I did my own coloring and everything, 12 to 13 here with Whispers of Doom. Everything else, for Phantasmal Fireball, it took me 10 attempts, so roughly 1 Divine of leveling of Fireballs to get 2 that are level 21s. This one was 4, Stygian was 1.5, Boots Complete was 1. Determination was paid for a Lab Runner, so that's 3 Divines. Leveling from level 98 to 100 was 98.5 to 100 was 5 Divines, well, almost 5. The Awakened Gems were roughly 2 to 3 total or something. So all in all, the setup was somewhat of around 70 Divines. Of course, including 1 Divine for this, 2 times 1.5 for these. These were 20 Chaos each. And the regular gems were like up to 2 Divines. So that's the whole calculation. Now, the breakdown. And to finalize this, in the POB, what I want you to pay attention to is when we go to configuration, we have everything set up here with, of course, reduction of enemy fire resistance. So the POB calculates, if I put this at 50, it calculates 4.5 million, but if we put this at -1, it gives you the maximum. It's -136, 139.6 or 135.9, pardon, 135.9 resistances that we shred on an enemy that has 50% resistance. So 50 minus everything, minus, and then we add Eye of Malice, which adds another 50% on minus 90.6, we add 50%, and that's minus 135.9. So this is all set up. There's only one little difference, convergence. If you want to see the DPS with convergence, you click convergence. We have 7.5 million DPS with Ignite. Keep in mind, calcs. We go to here. This is 7.2 million. So let's go with calc. 7.2 million divided by 2.83 seconds. 2.83. That is 2.5 million Ignite damage per second on a single target every 4 seconds or every 4 seconds in 8-second intervals. So 4 seconds on, 4 seconds off, 4 seconds on, 4 seconds off. Now, if we remove convergence and we go calcs here, we have let's say 5.5 million divided by 2.83. That is 1.9 million AoE damage per second. This is for a single target, but this is what it does when we don't have convergence. Now, if we go for AoE, that number is Fireball AoE. That number is 3.4 divided by 2.83. That's 1.2 million Ignite DPS per second on AoE without convergence. This damage is enough to do anything in game besides Uber bosses, but it's not the damage issue, it's survivability / skill issue. Now, for flasks, you want to do Armor Flask to get extra armor. I did Ruby Flask because less fire damage taken, because I was farming also Searing Exarch and I had troubles with Ignites. Now there's no troubles with Ignites as much, so you can remove this one and add whatever you want. Ebullient Divine Life Flasks, I like bubbling. That's half of it you get instantly, half of it you get as a regen. And of course it's anti-bleed. Now, Enduring Eternal Mana Flask is what you need. Like, you cannot do it without an Enduring Flask. Also immunity to poison, because I didn't like poison at the time, but I didn't change the poison here from the Sulfur Flask, which is really good for Consecrated Ground. You can use Movement Speed Flask, Quicksilver with poison or something, whichever one you choose. Or you can just use Quicksilver with extra movement speed. I personally think the movement speed of the build is fine. And as you've seen from the beginning of the video, from that intro map, it does do things solid. I prefer to go slower than to go faster and make mistakes. All in all, that will be it for the Fireball Elementalist guide. in Path of Exile Crucible League. I actually managed to make this one shorter than an hour, which I am really impressed. But if you want to catch more of me, I am streaming either on Twitch or on YouTube. I'm most likely going to start streaming over on YouTube here, as I see you guys love the content that I've been putting out. There will be more guides, but one more important thing is when you go to YouTube and when you go to my channel, you can go to playlists and see Fireball Elementalist versus Bosses playlist. This will all be linked down below, where you can see my gear, you can see the POB of the current video, and you can see what I did, how I did it, how long it took me. So there's all of the information available. Plus, I also have some extra videos for you guys as well, which I'll show you right in a second here, that I will be posting, which is Expedition with a boss, Harvest boss, Uber Elder, Tain Lab, and so on. These will all be posted most likely these days. Probably today is Wednesday, probably today this build guide video is going to be launched. So if you have any further questions, feel free to post them down in the comments below. I try to reply to every single comment that I can. And if you want to catch me live, most likely I will start doing YouTube as well. So have a wonderful one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.